So right now we're in Saul and his son Jonathan and the troops who were there with them were staying at Geba at Benjamin, and Philistines were camped at Mishma. Raiding parties went out from the Philistine camps in three divisions. Over division headed towards the Ophrah road, leading in the land of Shual. The next division headed towards the Beth Horno road, and the last division headed down the border road. Last that looks out over Zewin Valley, over towards the wilderness. No blacksmith could be found in all the land of Israel because the Philistines had said otherwise the Hebrews will make swords or spears. So all the Israelites went to the Philistines to sharpen their pillows, mattocks, and axes and sickles. The price was 2/3 of a shekel, 4 pillows and mattock, and 1/3 of shekels for pitchforks and axes, and for putting a point on a cattle prod on. So on the day of battle, not a sword or spear could be found on the hand of any of the troops who were with Saul and Jonathan. Only Saul and his son Jonathan had weapons. Jonathan's victory over the Philistines. Now a Philistines garrison took control of the pass of Mikmash. The same day Saul's son Jonathan said to the attendant who carried his weapons, "Come on, let's cross over to the Philistine garrison on the other side of." However, he did not tell his father. Saul was staying under the pomegranate tree at Miglian on the outskirts of Gibeah. The troops with him numbered about 600. Ahijah, who was wearing an ephod, was also there. He was the son of Ahdu, the border of Ikshapon, son of Phinehas, son of Eli, the Lord's priest, and Shiloh. But the troops did not know that Jonathan had left. There were sharp columns of rock on both sides of the pass that Jonathan intended to cross to reach the Philistines' garrisons. One was named Bozez, and the other Sene. The one stood on the north side on one stood on the north to in front of Miksha, and the other on the south of in front of Geba. Johnson said to the attendant who carried his weapons, "Come on, let's cross over to the garrison of these uncircumcised men. Perhaps the Lord will help us. Nothing can keep the Lord from saving, whether by man or by few." His armor bearer responded, "Do what is in your heart. You choose. I'm right here with whatever you decide." "All right," Jonathan replied. "We'll cross over to the men and let them see us. If they say, 'Wait until we reach you,' then then we will stay where we are and not go up to them. And if we say to them, 'Come on up,' we'll and that then we'll go up because the Lord has handed them over to us. That will be our sign. Then let themselves be seen by the Philistines, said, 'Look, the Hebrews are coming out of the holes where they've been hiding.' The men of the garrison called to Jonathan and his armor bearer, 'Come on up, and we'll teach you a lesson.' They said, 'Follow me,' Jonathan told his armor bearer. 'The Lord has handed over to Israel.' Jonathan climbed up using his hands and feet, and his armor bearer behind him. Jonathan cut them down, and his armor bearer followed and finished them off. In that first assault, Jonathan and his armor bearer struck down about 20 men in Acre Field. A defeat for the Philistines. Terror spread through the Philistine camp and opened fire on all the troops, even the garrison and his Raidment parties were terrified. The earth shook and terror spread from Wad. When Saul's watchmen and Gibeons of Benjamin looked, then they saw the panicking troops scattering in every direction. So Saul said to the troops with him, "Call the roll and determine who has left us." They called the roll and saw that Jonathan and his armor bearer were gone. Saul told Ahijab, "Bring the ark of God," for it was with the Israelites at the time. While Saul spoke to the priests, the panic of the Philistine camp in, intensely. So Saul said to the priest, "Stop what you're doing." Saul and all the troops with him assembled and marched to the battle, and there the Philistines were fighting against each other in great confusion. There were Hebrews from the area who had gone earlier into the camp and to join the Philistines, but even the joint Israelites who were with Saul and Jonathan, when all the Israelites men were who had been who had been hiding in the hill country of Ephraim heard that the Philistines were fleeing, they also joined Saul and Jonathan in the battle. So the Lord saved Israel that day. Saul's rash oath. The battle extended beyond Bethaven, and Bethaven and the men of Israel were worn out that day. For Saul had placed weapons on the troops under the arch of an oath. The man who eats food evening, before I have taken vengeance on my enemies, is cursed. So none of the troops tasted any food. Everyone went to the forest, and there was honey in the ground. When the troops entered the forest, they saw the flood of honey, but none of them ate any of it because they feared the oath. However, Jonathan had not heard his father make the troops swear oath. He reached out with the end of the staff he was carrying and dipped it into the honeycombs. When he ate the honey, he had renewed energy, and the troops said, "Your father made the troops solemnly swear, the man who eats food today is cursed." And the troops were exhausted. Jonathan replied, "My father has brought trouble to the land. Just look at how I have renewed energy because I tasted a little of this honey. How much better if the troops had eaten freely today from the plunder they took from their enemies. Then the slaughter of the Philistines would have been much greater." So they struck down the Philistines at the day of the Michmas all the way to Aijalon, and since the Israelites were completely exhausted, they rushed to the plunder, took sheep, goats, cattle, and calves, slaughtered them on the ground, and ate men with the blood of still in it. Some reported to Saul, "Look, the troops are shining against the Lord by eating meat with the blood in it." Saul said, "You have been unfaithful. Roll a large stone over here at once." He then said, "Go among the troops and say to them, 'Let each man bring me his ox or his sheep. Do the slaughtering here, and then you can eat. Don't sin against the Lord by eating meat with the blood in it.'" So every one of the troops brought his ox that night and slaughtered it there. Thus Saul built an altar to the Lord. It was the first time he had built an altar to the Lord. Saul said, down." Saul said, "Go down after the Philistines tonight and plunder them until morning. Don't let even one remain." "Do whatever you want," the troops replied. But the priest said, "Let's approach God here." So Saul inquired of God, "Should I go after the Philistines? Will you hand me over them to hand them over? Will you hand them over to Israel?" But God did not answer him that day. Saul said, all your leaders of your troops come here. Let us investigate how this sin has occurred. How this sin has occurred. Yeah, this is repulsive. Damn, who knows this was freaking Will you hand them over to Israel? But God did not answer him that day. Saul said, all your leaders of the troops come here. Let us investigate how this sin has occurred today. As surely as the Lord had as the Lord lives, who saves Israel, even if it's because of my son Jonathan, he must die. Not one of the troops answered him. So he said to all of Israel, you will be you will be on one side, and my son Jonathan will be on the other side. And the troops replied, do whatever you want. So Saul said to the So Saul said to the Lord, God of Israel, why have you not answered your servant today? If the unrighteous is in me, or in my day, if the unrighteous is in me, or in my son Jonathan, Lord God of Israel, give Urim. But if the if the fault is in your peoples, Israel, give Tum. Jonathan and Saul were selected, and the troops were cleared of the change. Then Saul said, cast the lot between me and my son Jonathan. And Jonathan was elected. Saul commanded him. Tell me what you did, Jonathan told him. I tasted a little honey at the end of the staff I was carrying. I am ready to die. Saul declared to him, may God punish me and do so severely, if you do not die, Jonathan. But the people said to Saul, must Jonathan die, who accomplished such a great deliverance for Israel? No, no, as the Lord lives, not a hair of his head will fall to the ground, for he worked with God's help today. So the people redeemed Jonathan, and he did not die. Then Saul gave up the pursuit of Philistines, and the Philistines returned their own territory. The summary of Saul's kingship. When Saul assumed the kingship over Israel, he fought against all his enemies and every direction against Moab, the Ammonites, Edom, the king of Zob, and the Philistines. Wherever he turned, he caused havoc. He fought bravely, defeated the Amalekites, and rescued Israel from those who plundered them. Saul's sons were Jonathan, Ishvi, and Malchushiah. The names of his two daughters were Mereb and firstborn the Michal the younger. The name of Saul's wife, An Ahinomaz, daughter of Uhimaz. The name of the commander of his army was Abner, son of Saul's uncle Ner. Saul's father was Kish. Abner's father was Ner, son of Abiel. The conflict with the Philistines was fierce all of Saul's days. Who so Saul whoever Saul noticed any strong or valiant man, he enlisted him. Saul rejected as king. Samuel told Saul, the Lord sent me to anoint you as king over his people of Israel. Now listen to the word of the Lord. This is what the Lord of Aaron says. I witnessed that the Amalekites did to the Israelites when they opposed them before the Lord as they were coming out of Egypt. Now go and attack the Amalekites and completely destroy everything they have. Do not spare them, unalive men and women, infants, and nursing babies, oxen, and sheep, camel, and donkeys. Thus Saul summoned the troops and counted them 200,000 foot soldiers and 10,000 men from Judah. Saul came to the city of Amalek and set up an ambush in the wadi. He warned the Canaanites, since you showed kindness to all the Israelites when they came out of Egypt, go on and leave. Get away from the Amalekites, or I'll weep you away with them. So the Canaanites withdrew from the Amalekites. Then Saul struck down the Amalekites from Havilah and all the way to Shur, which is next to Egypt. He captured King Agag and Amalek alive, but he completely destroyed all the rest of the people with the sword. And the troops were spared Agag, and the best of the sheep, goats, cattle, choice animals, and as well as the young rams, and the best of everything. Best of everything. Best of everything. They were not willing to destroy. They were not willing to destroy them, but they did everything in the worthless of unwanted beings. When the word of the Lord came to Samuel, I regret that I made Samuel king, for he has turned away from following me and has not carried out the instructions. Became angry and cried to the Lord at night. Early in the morning, Samuel got up to confront Saul, but it was reported that Samuel went to Carmel when he set up a monument for him. In the morning, got up and confronted Saul, but it was reported to Samuel that Samuel went to Carmel. He set up a monument for himself. Then he turned around and went down to Gilgad. Then Samuel came to him. Saul said, "May the Lord bless you. I have carried out the Lord's instructions." Uh, Samuel, then what is this sound of sheep and goats and cattle near? So Saul answered, the troops brought them from the Amalekites and spared the sheep, the best sheep, goats, and cattle in order to offer a sacrifice to the Lord your God, but the rest we destroyed. Stop, exclaimed Samuel. Let me tell you what the Lord said to me last night. Tell me, he replied. Samuel continued. Samuel continued, although you once considered yourself unimportant, have you not become the leader of the tribes of Israel? The Lord anointed the king over Israel has sent and has sent and has sent you on a mission, he said. Go and completely destroy the sinful Amalekites. Fight against them until you have annihilated them. So why don't you obey the Lord? Why did you rush on the plunder and do what was evil in the Lord's sight? But I did obey the Lord, Saul answered. I went on a mission the Lord gave me. I brought back King Agag and Amalek, and I completely destroyed the Amalekites. The troops took sheep, goats, and cattle from the plunder, the best of what was set apart for destruction, to sacrifice to the Lord your God at Gilgad. Then Samuel said, does the Lord take pleasure in burnt offerings and sacrifices as much as in obeying the Lord? Look, to obey is better than sacrifice. To pay attention is better than fat of rams. For rebellion is like the sin of divination, and defiance is like the wickedness of idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has rejected you as king. Saul answered Samuel, I have sinned, and I have transgressed the Lord's commands and your words, because I was afraid of the people I obeyed, not because therefore please forgive my sin and return with me so I can worship the Lord. Samuel replied to Saul, I will not return with you because you rejected the word of the Lord, and God has rejected you from being king over Israel. When Samuel turned to go, Saul grabbed the corner of his robe, and it tore. Samuel said to him, the Lord has torn the kingship of Israel away from you today, and has given it to your neighbor, who is better than you. Furthermore, the Eternal One of Israel does not lie or change his mind, for he is not man who changes his mind. Wow. Saul said, I have sinned. Please honor me Please honor me now before the elders of my people and before Israel. Come back with me so I can bow and worship. Come back with me so I can bow and worship to the Lord your God. Then Samuel went back following Saul, and Saul bowed down to the Lord. Samuel said, bring me King Agag and Amalek. Samuel said, bring me King Agag. Samuel and King Agag of Amalek came to him trembling. Trembling, for he thought certainly the bitterness of death has come. Samuel declared, "As your swords has made women childless, so is your mother will be childless among women." Then be hacked Agag to pieces before the Lord at Gilgal. Samuel went to Rami, and Saul went up to his home, and Gilgal to Saul. Even to the day of his death, Samuel never saw Saul. Damn, they never saw Saul. Again, Samuel mourned for Saul, and the Lord regretted he had made Saul king over Israel. Damn. Whoa. Damn. Samuel anoints David. Samuel anoints David. The Lord said to Samuel, "How long are you going to mourn for Saul?" Thank God they found. Whew. Samuel. The Lord said to Samuel, "How long are you going to mount for Saul, since I have rejected him as king over Israel? Fill your horn with oil and go. I am sending you to Jesse of Bethlehem because I have selected a king from his sons." Samuel asked, "How can I go? Saul will hear about it and unalive me." The Lord answered, "Take your young cow with you and say, 'I have come to sacrifice to the Lord.' I then invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will let you know that what you are to do, you are to anoint for me the one I indicate to you." Samuel did what the Lord directed and went to Bethlehem. Then the elders of the town met him. They trembled and asked, "Do you come in peace?" "In peace," he replied. "I have come to sacrifice. The Lord, consent yourselves and come with me in the sacrifice." Then he consecrated Jesse and his sons and invited them to the sacrifice. Then they arrived. Samuel saw Elijah and said, "Currently the Lord's anointed one is here before him." But the Lord said to Samuel, "Do not look at his appearance or his stature, because I have rejected him. Humans do not see what the Lord sees, for humans see what is visible, but the Lord sees the heart." Jesse called, Jesse called, for the Lord sees the heart. Just Jesse called Abinad and presented him to Samuel. "The Lord hasn't chosen this one either," Samuel said. Then Jesse presented Shamath, but Samuel said, "The Lord hasn't chosen this one either." After Jesse presented 7 of his sons to him, Samuel told him, "The Lord hasn't chosen any of these." Samuel asked him, "Are these all the sons you have?" "This is still the youngest," he answered, "but right now he's tending the sheep." Samuel told Jesse, Send for him. We won't sit down to eat until he gets here." But Jesse sent for him. He had beautiful eyes and a healthy, handsome appearance. But then the Lord said, "Anoint him, for he is the one." Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the presence of his brothers, and the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully on David for the day. ah, on David for the day forward. Then Samuel sent out. Then Samuel. David from the day forward. Then Samuel set out and went to Ramah. David in Saul's court. Now the Spirit of the Lord had set Saul. Now the Spirit of the Lord had set Saul, and an evil spirit sent from the Lord began to torment him. Interesting. Now the Spirit of the Lord had sent Saul, and an evil spirit sent from the Lord began to torment him. So Saul's servant said to him, You see that an evil spirit from God is tormenting you. Let our Lord command your servants here in in your presence to look for someone who knows how to play the lyre. Whenever the evil spirit from God comes on you, that person can play the lyre, and you will feel better. Then Saul commanded his servants, "Find me someone who plays well, and bring him to me." One of the young men answered, "I have seen a son of Jesse of Bethlehem, who knows how to play the lyre. He is also a valiant man, a warrior, eloquent, handsome, and the Lord is with him." Then Saul dispatched messengers to Jesse and said to him, "Send me your son David, who is with the sheep." So Jesse took a donkey loaded with bread, a wineskin, and one young goat, and sent them by his son David to Saul. Then David came to Saul and entered his service. Saul loved him very much, and David became his armor bearer. Then Saul went word to Jesse, "Let David remain in my service, for he has found favor with me." Whenever the Spirit from God came to Saul, David would pick up his lyre and play, and would then be relieved, feel better, and the evil spirit would leave him. Interesting. David versus Goliath. The Philistines gathered their forces for war at Sokoh, and Judah had encamped between Sokoh and Azekah in Ephes Saul and the men of Israel gathered and camped in the valley of Elah. Then they lined up in battle formation to face the Philistines. The Philistines were standing on one hill, and the Israelites were standing on the other hill, with a ravine between them. Then a champion named Goliath from Gath came out of the Philistine camp. He he was 9 feet 9 inches tall, and wore a bronze helmet and bronze scale armor. Whoa! He was 9 feet and 9 inches tall, and wore a bronze helmet. Wait, then a champion named Goliath from Gath came out of the Philistine camp. He was 9 feet and 9 inches tall, and wore a bronze helmet and bronze scale armor that weighed 25 pounds. There was bronze armor in his shins, and bronze javelin was slung between his shoulders. His spear shaft was like a waver beam, and the iron point of his spear weighed 50 pounds. In addition, a shield bearer was walking in front of him. He stood and shouted to the Israelites battle formation. He stood and shouted in the Israelites' battle formation. "Why do you come out of to line up in the battle formation?" he asked. "Am I not a Philistine, and are you not servants of Saul? Choose one of the men of your men, and have him come down against me. If he wins in a fight against me and unalives me, he will bear your servants. But if I win against him and unalive him, then you will be our servants and serve us." Then the Philistines said, "I defy the ranks of Israel today. Send me a man so we can fight each other." Then Saul and Israel heard these words from the Philistines. They lost their courage and were terrified. Then David was the son of Ephraim from Bethlehem, and Judah named Jesse. Jesse had 8 sons, and during Saul's reign was already an old man. Jesse's 3 eldest sons had followed Saul to the war, and their names were Eliab, the firstborn Abinab, the next Asab, the next Now David was the son of Ephrathite from Bethlehem of Judah named Jesse. Jesse had 8 sons, and during Saul's reign was already an old man. Jesse's 3 oldest sons had followed Saul to the war, and their names were Eliab and firstborn Anidad, the next of Shammah, and the third, and David was the youngest. The 3 oldest had followed Saul, but David kept going back and forth from Saul to tend his father's flock in Bethlehem every morning and evening for 40 days. And Philistines came forward and took his stand. One day Jesse had told his son David, "Take his half bushel and of roasted grain along with these 10 loaves of bread for your brothers, and hurry to their camp. Also take these 10 per 10 portions of cheese in the field commanded. Check on the well-being of your brothers and bring a confirmation from them. They are with Saul and all the men of Israel in the valley of Elah, fighting with the Philistines." So David got up early in the morning, left the flock with someone to keep it, loaded up, and set it out as Jesse had charged him. He arrived at the perimeter of the camp as the army was marching out of the battle formation, shouting their battle cry. Israel and the Philistines lined up in the battle formation, facing each other. David left his supplies. Ah. David left his supplies in the care of the quartermaster and ran to the battle of line. When he arrived, he asked his brothers how they were. While he was speaking with them, suddenly a champion named Goliath and the Philistine from Gath came forward from the Philistines' battle line and shouldered him with unusual words, and shouted his usual words, which David heard. When all the Israelites men saw Goliath, they retreated from him terrified. Previously, an Israelite man had declared, "Did you see this man who keeps coming out? He comes to defy Israel. The king will make the man who unalives him very rich and will give him his daughter. The king will also make the family of that man's father exempt from paying taxes in Israel." David spoke to the men who were standing with him. "That will be done for the man who unalives a Philistine and removes his disgrace from Israel. Just who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God?" The troops told him about the offer, concluded that what will be done for the man who unalives him. David told his brother, and he spoke to the man, and he became very angry with him. "Why did you come down here?" he asked. "Did you leave those few sheep with the wilderness? I know your arrogance and your evil heart. You come down to see the battle. What have I done now?" Protest David. It was just a question. Then he turned from those besides him in order to others in front of him and asked about the offer. The people gave him that same answer as before. What David said was overheard and reported to Saul, and so he had David brought to him. David said to Saul, "Don't let anyone be discouraged by him. Your servant will go and fight this Philistine." But Saul replied, "You can't go fight this Philistine. You're just a youth, and he's been a warrior since he was young." David answered Saul, "Your servant has been tending his father's sheep. Whoever is a lion or a bear came and carried off a lamb from a flock. I went after it, struck it down, and rescued the lamb from its mouth. If it reared up against me, I would grab it by its fur, strike it down, and unalive it. Your servant has unalived lions and bears. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, for he has defied armies of the living God." Then David said, "The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine." Saul said to David, "Go, go, and make the Lord be with you." Then Saul had his own military clothes put on David. He put a bronze helmet on David's head and had him put on armor. David strapped his sword on over the military clothes and tried to walk, but he was not used to them. I can't walk in these, David said to Saul. I'm not used to them. Go, David took them off. Instead, they took his staff in his hand and chose 5 smooth stones from the wadi and put them in the pouch in his shepherd's bag. Then, with his sling in his hand, he approached the Philistine. The Philistine came closer and closer to David, and the shield bearer in front of him. When the Philistine looked and saw David, and he despised him because he was just a youth, healthy and handsome. He said to David, "Am I a dog that you came against me with sticks?" Then he cursed David by his gods. "Come here," the Philistine called to David, "and I will give your flesh to the birds of the sky and the wild beasts." David said to the Philistine, "You come against me with a sword, spear, javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord of armies. And the God of the ranks of Israel, and the God of the ranks of Israel, you have defied him. Today the Lord will hand you over to me. Today I'll strike you down, remove your head, and give the corpses of the Philistine camp to the birds of the sky and the wild creatures of the earth. Then all the world will know that Israel has a God, and this and and has a God, and and his whole assembly will know that it is not by sword or by spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's. He will hand you over to us." When the Philistines started forward to attack him, David ran quickly in the battle line up to meet the Philistines. David put his hands in the bag, took out a stone, slung it, and hit the Philistines in the forehead. The stone sank into the forehead, and he fell face down to the ground. David defeated the Philistine with a sling and a stone. David overpowered the Philistine and unalived it without having a sword. David ran and stood over him. He grabbed the Philistine's sword and pulled it in front its sheath and used it to unalive him. Then he cut off his head. Then the Philistines saw that their hero was dead. They fled. The men of Israel, the Judah, railed, shout out their battle cry, and chased the Philistines to the entrance of the valley of the gates of Ekron. Philistine bodies were strewn all along the Shariam road to Gath and Ekron. When the Israelites returned from the pursuit of the Philistines, they plundered their camps. David took Goliath's head and brought it to Jerusalem, but he put Goliath's weapons in his tent. When Saul had seen David going out of the confront the Philistine, he asked Abner, the commander of the army, "Whose son is in the youth Abner? Your Majesty, surely as you live." "I don't know," Abner replied. The king said, "Find out whose son is young this young man is." Then David returned from unaliving the Philistine. Abner took him and brought him before Saul, and the Philistine's head still in his hand. Saul said to him, "Whose son are you, young man?" "The son of the servant Jesse of Bethlehem," David answered. David's success. When David had finished speaking with Saul, Jonathan was bound to David in close friendship and loved him as much as he loved himself. Saul kept David with him from the day with him with him from the day on, did not let him return to his father's house. Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as so much him as himself. Then Jonathan removed the robe that he was wearing and gave it to David along with his military tunic, his sword, his bow, and his belt. David marched out with the army and was successful in everything Saul sent him to do. Saul put him in command of the fighting men, which pleased all the people and Saul's servants as well. What the hell?